about the DCCC, which I mentioned earlier. The DCCC clears all trades and margins market participants on a daily basis. So, how does this work? Essentially, money is paid by a trading member into their DCCC account. As the member puts an order into the exchange, that order is checked against their balance with the DCCC and money is set aside as margin. If that order is cancelled, the margin is returned to the member's account. If the order trades, that margin is kept to one side as an insurance policy, a guarantee that the trader's obligations are fulfilled to not just the DCCC, but to the member on the other side of the trade. The DCCC also takes care of our physical delivery. Now, we only have two physically deliverable contracts, spot gold and polypropylene. Physical delivery is facilitated through the ultimate owner of the DCCX, the DMCC, and their trade flow system. Trade flow can deal with almost any commodity permitted to pass through the ports of Dubai and acts as a repository for Sharia compliant as well as international style financing. Now, what is blockchain? I guess that's the reason we're all here. So I'm going to give a very basic explanation of what blockchain is, because I hope that by the end of this session, we'll all be able to listen to some of my colleagues that are speaking and have a little bit more knowledge, because it can get a little complex at times. So I'm going to try and break it down for you. That picture of a single computer you see is a block, or it's also known as a node, a very simple computer, just standing alone by itself. Below that, I have two nodes, or two blocks. They're interacting, having a conversation with each other. But there's no one there to see them have this conversation. There's no witness. There's no one able to verify it. When we look at the third one, where there's three computers, this is essentially a basic blockchain. This is multiple computers interacting, and it has to be a minimum of three. So at any given moment, two of those computers can be talking to each other, and one witnesses that conversation or verifies that conversation. If it swaps to another two, the third computer takes on the role as the witness, as the verifier. What do these nodes do? As I've suggested, they're blocks, they're single computers, so they interact with each other. They continue verifying each transaction. Now, a transaction could be anything that happens between two computers. That could be numbers passing, that could be a conversation that two people are having on the other end. What it does on the blockchain is it creates an immutable record, and I'm sure that's going to be a word you're going to hear a lot more of. Immutable means unable to be changed. So when something is recorded on blockchain, it is essentially verified by a number of other nodes, blocks, or individual computers. As each node or block is added to the blockchain, so it becomes more secure. There's more nodes and blocks verifying each conversation. So if you look at the diagram on the bottom right, this is IBM's very basic drawing of what a blockchain is and how it works. As you can see, there's numerous computers there talking with each other, interacting, whilst other computers are looking on and verifying what's going on between those computers. Therefore, if anyone tried to change anything within one of those computers that wasn't agreed by the rest, it would be rejected. This is what makes it so secure. Now, a little bit of background, a little bit more on blockchain. Blockchain is the most famous chain. It's powered using Bitcoin, which we've probably all heard of and we'll probably hear a lot more about in the coming few hours. It was the first and currently the largest of all the blockchains in existence. At present, there is over 709 blockchains. In theory, these should all be referred to as alternative chains, an alternative to blockchain, but they are often just referred to as blockchains for simplicity. Now, when we refer to blockchain, and we refer to every chain as blockchain, it's much like when we refer to a Hoover, a generic term for a brand of vacuum cleaners. It's just taken on that moniker. Now, each of the blockchains is powered by a different token. As I said, the main blockchain is powered by Bitcoin, which is the one that most of us are familiar with. But there are other chains that exist. So, These chains, which are powered by different currencies, such as Ethereum, Ripple, or Litecoin, also very similar to Bitcoin in the fact that they're coins and they power a blockchain. But they're much, much smaller than the initial blockchain. So if we look, Ethereum is 6.9% the size of the original Bitcoin blockchain. Ripple, 2.3% the size. And Litecoin, 1.6% the size. These are the three largest below blockchain, or the original blockchain. So that gives you an idea of how dominant the original blockchain is in this space. Now, as I touched on before, the speed of blockchain is changing every day. So bit by bit, the technology is getting faster and faster. How long is it going to take for blockchain to be able to handle the number of transactions that Visa can handle? Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. But then for it to go onwards, maybe that's going to take another 2 years, 5 years. But it is getting faster and it will grow. Who is using blockchain in finance? It's easy to actually ask who isn't using blockchain. I've recently returned from London and there was a definitive buzz there about blockchain. Every organisation, every bank, every exchange has someone looking at it. And there's two ways of looking at it. You either look at it and you're actively investing in the technology to find the best route for yourselves, to see if there's a process you can make quicker, or you're watching everybody else do it, looking to take advantage of that. And that's worth remembering. Just because there is a new technology, it doesn't mean everyone has to rush to invest. So, Deutsche Bank, one of the largest banks in the world, they use over 5,500 internal systems. The only way these systems talk to each other is with human interaction. Imagine if those systems could do that without humans. Imagine if they could all be put on a chain where everything they do is constantly reconciled and agreed, and any erroneous data is spat out and investigated. That's a lot of people. If you look at my past roles, how much do they cost organisations? Not just the people, not just in salary, but infrastructure too. Office space, chairs, heat or AC in this country, lighting, everything that's involved with employing a person and giving them space in an office. That's a lot of money. Then let's look at the man versus the machine, the human element. Machines only make mistakes when humans interfere or because of human programming. There's a number of trading algorithms over the years that have worked back to front. Why? A human uploaded them wrongly. Why does a computer often crash? Okay, sometimes it gets overloaded, but quite often it's something that a human has done to make it crash, whether we know it or not. Unfortunately, as humans, we are fallible. We make mistakes. Computers, not so much. The mistakes they make tend to be less, and they are only influenced by human interaction. As I said earlier, think about all the transactions. Almost everything we do involves a transaction. Whether it's logging into your computer, walking into a building, using your bank card, using your NOL card, using your Emirates ID, checking in on an aeroplane. Think about the added security that we could have. If everything is on your Emirates ID, how can you pretend to be someone else? How do you make a fake Emirates ID with your picture or someone else's picture and incorrect or correct information? It's going to be very, very difficult. And if you do, and it flags up, almost immediately, the blockchain will reject that. They will spot the erroneous transaction. Think about the possibility of the financial world acting in perpetual motion. The moment you make a payment, it hits someone's bank account. The moment you buy something, that money goes directly to the merchant's account. If we look at what banks have done in the past, it's only recently we've had almost instant transfers among certain banks. If we go back 5 years, if you want to transfer money from Dubai to the UK or to India, it takes 5 days. It still does in some places. Why did it take 5 days? The answer is, you'd make your payment, your bank would hold on to the money for 2 days, they would pass it to the other bank in the UK, who would also hold on to it for 2 days before being credited to the account. Now, each of these banks was using that money overnight to earn themselves more interest, to earn themselves money and not credit it to us as individuals. Now interest rates are so low, and in fact negative, banks don't want to hold your money. They can't actually earn anything from it anymore. And if they can, it's very small. So, why shouldn't they be putting our money in our chosen accounts instantly? In theory, on blockchain, I could do a transaction this second that could hit an account in the UK like that. No more waiting, no more time, access to your money when you want it. Think about your identification being secure. When we make bank transfers, we have to use codes, we have to use passwords, we have to use logins, we have to verify SMSs. What if you could just hold your phone up to your face, take a picture, and you're immediately verified? Much like a fingerprint, your biometrics or your facial data is different. Everybody's is different and cannot be recreated. Think about the efficiency. How many roles that humans perform could be taken care of by a computer? Remember my list of roles early on? Those back and middle office roles? They could be eliminated. I'm not advocating the loss of jobs, but unfortunately in modern society, as we've seen over the last 50 to 100 years, as a new technology comes along, so people will retrain themselves and retrench to find other employment. Think of the added reliability and profitability of companies and countries. This is blockchain. This is the future. This is now. Thank you all for listening. Have a good day.
So I'd just like to talk first about the current system for trading shares in the market. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with how this works, but it's just to give you an idea of how this works so that we can contrast it with what the actual proposed changes are. So as you can see from the little diagram here, typically when you're going to buy a share, you've got a buyer and a seller, and they go to their brokers, who then meet on a trading venue. Sometimes in some countries they use a CCP, which is a central counterparty clearinghouse. And if they do use a CCP, now there's a sort of a process of novation, which means the CCP now becomes responsible for the trade in case the buyer, the seller, or maybe even the clearing member default, which means that they don't pay, they don't deliver the share as promised. Maybe like we had with the case of Lehman Brothers, who defaulted a few years ago. And then there's a settlement agent who contacts the Central Securities Depository. And so there's a whole process of messages going back and forth. You can see it looks complicated because the reality is it is. It is very complicated. And all these intermediaries are in place because, they're getting a cut, they're getting a fee. There's a whole system that's developed over time. Everybody's making money. But is it the most efficient system? I would say probably not. Is it a quick system? Absolutely not. So that's the kind of system most countries have in place, or the way most securities markets work around the world right now. It looks something like that. So what has the European Central Bank said on the topic? Well, they've said that at present, financial intermediaries keep multiple separate records of the same information. So again, this is kind of inefficient because we have information in the accounts of different intermediaries, sometimes in different countries, and of course they all have to be continuously updating those records. It takes time, it costs money. And then Oliver Wyman and Euroclear also published a report and said the current methods are highly complex. They utilize fragmented IT and data architectures and suffer from a lack of common standards. This creates the continual need to reconcile data with massive systems and process duplication, leading to high costs and protracted time to execute tasks. So again, not only do we have all these intermediaries in place, but they don't always use the same standards, and so it becomes complicated. It costs a lot of money. So what are some of the disadvantages of the current system? Well, first of all, there's a lack of interoperability, which means that you have different networks, right? Different stock exchanges, perhaps, different markets, and there's not always a streamlined way for them to communicate with each other, right? As I said, they have to go through various intermediaries, especially if they're buyers and sellers in different countries. This requires reconciliation among all the market participants, which basically means that, as I said, they have to update their accounts every day at multiple levels. Okay, so that takes time and it takes communication, and of course, sometimes errors occur because the message is miscommunicated, or maybe through human error. The information's input incorrectly by one of the intermediaries, and of course, that also has its own costs. Intermediaries must communicate with each other to update their individual databases in order to settle a securities trade. So again, as I said, there's a high cost involved. There are also operational risks in the current system. Exchanges are vulnerable, okay? They're susceptible to cyber attacks, data corruption, right? Maybe the computer servers malfunction. And of course, when you have a centralized institution that records everything, if there's a cyber attack, it can knock out the entire stock market, right? Because there's only one record of all the trades that have happened, or all the customer records, or all of that, are all in one place. So when there's an attack, the data's lost, and again, there are costs to this. The technology for the cash leg and the securities leg of a trade must be reconciled. Of course, when you're buying and selling shares, it's not just shares that are being bought and sold. There's also a cash transaction, right? Because you're buying maybe the shares for cash. And so that whole process also needs to be streamlined. Okay, now we're just talking about the securities leg being on a blockchain, but what about the payments leg? What are they going to use? Are they going to use Bitcoin? Are they going to use normal cash? Of course, if you're going to make a bank transfer, as most of you know, that still takes a couple of days, so now it's not matching. The security reaches the buyer before the cash does, so we got a bit of a problem, right? There's a delay, and that creates counterparty risk. Possession of an asset is prerequisite to a trade, so that means you have to have the asset now before you can sell it. If you're going to sell a share, okay, the current system now, you could do margin trading, so it means you can really just borrow from someone else. You can't really do that anymore, because as I say, you're transferring ownership as soon as you enter that instruction into the blockchain. Harmonization is necessary to reap the benefits of distributed ledger technology. One of the problems here is, at the moment, a lot of different banks are creating different networks. And if you have different networks, you can't really have a system that works well. Then the networks still have to communicate with each other. So a lot of experts at the moment are saying that unless there's one platform for everybody, it defeats the purpose of having a blockchain or blockchain technology. You still need intermediaries to conduct know your customer and anti-money laundering. Okay, so one of the a lot of people say you can get rid of all the intermediaries, but intermediaries serve an important function, right? They check on their customers. They have to know their identities. They have to make sure they're not sending money for terrorist purposes, or for any kind of money laundering or proceeds of crime. So if you get rid of intermediaries, how does that happen now? Lack of confidentiality and privacy. The problem with having a blockchain network is now, as I just said, everybody has a record of all the shares and where they are and who has them. And even though they might not have the names of the participants, you can still see that public address, which means you can see how much money is sitting in a public address. Okay? Now, this beats confidentiality, because really, banks like to trade or make trades in privacy, so they don't always want people to know how much they have. Their competitors, they don't want them to know how much they have, or what their plans are. And with the blockchain system, everybody can see it. Some companies are working right now on technology to see if they can get rid of that that privacy element, or rather introduce privacy into the system. But that, again, I don't know about that because that's more of a technological development. And then legal uncertainty. I mean, again, this is new technology. There really are no laws, or few laws, that sort of explain how this technology works from a property law perspective, from a trust law perspective, from a contract law perspective. I mean, we talk about smart contracts, but smart contracts are not really even contracts. So again, you know, the whole laws of how the financial markets work are going to have to be rewritten as well, and that takes time. Okay, barriers to adopting distributed ledger technology. The technology is very new, it's not mature, and as I just mentioned a second ago, the laws and regulations will have to be rewritten, which takes time. Okay, so just as a final point, what's the overall consensus? Well, here there are some regulatory perspectives and some academic perspectives, and I think pretty much they all say exactly the same thing. So the European Central Bank says it is possible that DLT may find its way into the mainstream market, but should this happen, it is more likely to cause a gradual change in processes rather than a revolution in the market. Larissa Lee, who's an academic from the United States and published an excellent legal paper on this, says that it is unlikely that a crypto securities market will ever completely replace the traditional stock market. ESMA, which is the European Securities Market Authority, so the regulator of the EU markets, securities markets, ESMA does not express at this stage any opinion on the DLT, so they really have no opinion because they don't know where it's going. It's still very new, so they haven't said what they think is going to happen. Oliver Wyman in Euroclear, any journey towards a capital market system based on blockchain technology will be a step-by-step adoption rather than a big bang reorganization. The system is simply too big, complex, and important. And then finally, Mainelli and Milne, which are two academics from England, wrote a report for SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Telecommunications and there you go, transfer. It's a long one. Thank you. They wrote a whole report a couple of months ago. So basically, they went around to all the major banks. They conducted interviews. It's an excellent report, and they, this was their final consensus. They said achieving all the potential benefits for mutual distributed ledgers will require broad-level buy-in to a substantial commitment of time and resource, and active regulatory support for process reform with relatively little short-term payoff. So if we look at the overall picture of what regulators and academics are saying, they're saying, look, this technology is new, it has the potential to change things, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's probably not going to replace the market as it currently works. It probably is going to work side by side. Okay, it's going to be maybe more of a niche thing. So, you as regulators here at the Emirates Securities and Commodities Authority, you can take a deep breath and not worry that you're falling behind or anything like that, because even other regulators around the world are just sort of sitting back and seeing what's going to happen, and they don't seem to be too worried that it's going to be revolutionary change. Like tomorrow night you've got to wake up and rewrite everything, rewrite all your laws, change all your technology. It's probably not going to be like that. It's going to take time, 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years. It's going to be a slow, gradual thing. So these are the references, and that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
You have a computer, but in this sense it's the node, and the blocks of data are on this node, and this node could be anywhere. With Bitcoin, you're talking about over 10 to 11,000 installations of nodes that are used as miners and validators of the system. What we're looking at to implement in the securities markets and the financial institutions here in the UAE is the underlying technology, which allows us to eliminate a central authority for all intents and purposes and work with a consortia of people that are like-minded but don't necessarily trust each other. Blockchain ledger characteristics. we're looking at centralized ledger networks, distributed ledger networks, and decentralized ledger networks. If you were to take a bank that worked on a centralized database, single entry ledger for accounting purposes, and move to a distributed ledger network, this could be a ledger running inside DFM or ADX. It could be a ledger running between the GCC countries. It could be decentralized and ledger running between the regulators of the GCC countries with the decentralized components as the stock exchanges in that country, the brokers in that specific country. So you would end up with a decentralized effect with everybody communicating with everybody. The type of ledgers that could be involved are replicated ledgers, shared ledgers, or transactional ledgers. Again, do not worry about transactions because there are chains out that compete and even do better than Visa with its 65,000 transactions per second. The blockchain anatomy. We describe it as a database of transactions split into blocks of data, which are validated by an entire network and added to the chain of prior transactions. This entire network can be a minimum of 3 nodes, as Tobias pointed out, because you do need to have, even if it's implemented individually in a company or something like that, you still need the validator node to make this make sense. So I'll show you with the e-voting application, it makes sense to have a regulator node sitting at ESCA or SCA at the Ministry of Economics and possibly at the issuer during an AGM meeting or a voting event. What does blockchain enable? It allows untrusting parties with common interests to co-create permanent, unchangeable, and transparent records of exchange and processing without relying on a central authority. Why is it significant? If the internet is disruptive, then the blockchain is also a disruptive technology for an exchange of value, unlike the internet was for dissemination of information. What are the implications? Disintermediation. Take the people that are taking a piece of the pie out of the middle and go let them retrain and do something else. Speed and efficiency. Certainty. Automation. Under certainty, he was talking about the notary earlier. Provide proof of process and proof of provenance. In other words, when did this originate? Where did it come from? This is part of the blockchain, providing proof that that 100 dirham note was actually a 100 dirham note. Should have been in that process. Are trusted intermediaries needed? This is a point that I take issue with sometimes because I don't think, like the Australian Stock Exchange and what she's trying to do, digital assets, with that commitment to do a big bang on the Australian Stock Exchange, they got to be having nightmares because they're not only facing cultural problems, but regulatory problems also. And we run into the same thing here, okay? There are brokers that don't want to get rid of their money immediately. Yes, we could do T plus minus 0 or T plus a few seconds, okay, in trade reconciliation. But that's not to be. We look at Saudi, just went from T plus 0 to T plus 3 to make it easier for external sources to get money coming in. US went from T plus 3 down to T plus 2. We're sitting at T plus 2, but there's a reason for it, okay? There are processes in place, and there are laws and regulations and a cultural mindset that make this process work best. Maybe we could come together and bring the extremes toward the middle if we were to offer an option to the broker. Do you want to settle this deal now? and are all the pieces there ready for it to be settled now? And how does that affect the overall netting process 2 days from now? So there could be a, yes, I want to do this now, and move on. It's just a thought. Participants in a blockchain network. As I said, I'm not talking about Bitcoin, I'm talking about blockchain. I'm talking about participants in a network. You have participants in networks now that exist without blockchain. Normally, in a blockchain network, we have the regulator. I mentioned regulator nodes. These would be nodes particularly that set themselves to be installed at a regulator's data center that would give them oversight or non-executable read-only views into what's going on, drill-down views. The certificate authority, who's going to issue the private keys? Who's going to do the notarization? Who's going to do the time stamping? The blockchain developer, the architect, what have you, and traditional processing platform is the hardware and stuff like that that we're using. There are technologies out today. One company in particular, protocol, works directly with HSM cards. So it works directly with the hardware toward encryption and issuing keys, working with SSL and everything else. So you can install a blockchain that works directly with your hardware. Intel has a system out there that works with a protocol directly. You install these HSM cards, everything works faster and it's more secure. This is my blockchain health check. I like this. If you're serious about doing it, ask yourself these serious questions. Okay? Will this use of blockchain be efficient? Is it going to make sense? Will it make things better? Will it be faster, safer, more visible to the consumer? That's a technical question. Will this use the blockchain the blockchain to share data appropriately? Will this use of the blockchain share data appropriately? Is the data question. Will this be fair? Is the governance question. Will this be legal? Is a compliance question. And will this keep the system stable? There are a lot of companies that want to touch on blockchain and immediately jump into it. A lot of successes are being announced about banks having transferred money. One happened here in the UAE to a bank in India in 2 seconds. Look behind the scenes, okay? That money didn't fly across an ocean, okay, without things going on in the background. So it happened awfully fast leading up to that point, which leads me to believe the system hasn't been thoroughly tested, so some things could happen down the road. I'm not saying they will, but it was quite fast. I don't see any problems with that. We were checking bank balances during IPOs in London for IPOs being run here in seconds. So technology is there. What the blockchain is being used for, Bitcoin type or blockchain type, don't know. Understand that as we move forward with blockchain, we need people that want to move forward with us. Get some people in your group to make a group of blockchain enthusiasts that are looking for positive results. Oh, we implemented the blockchain and it did this. That's great. That's what you're looking for. You need an integration mechanism. I point this one out because you need a group, but your group has to talk to other groups. You're going to need data from other sources. There's what's called side chains, and there are protocols out there that allow chains to talk to chains. Take this into consideration when you're designing your chain topology, the overall network, okay? Who do you have to play well with, Who do you have to watch out for? These are the questions that you should be asking yourself. By the way, open source software is a great source to try these things out. SCA may be looking into its own laboratory, its own sandbox or what have you. There are many of these test environments coming up where developers can come to SCA and say, I got a good idea for rules and regulations, monitoring and stuff like that, and they open up their laboratory and allow these developers to work in a blockchain protocol of their choice. These are being offered by the biggies, IBM and Microsoft. But you have to ask yourself one question. Have I done my due diligence? Is there a better protocol out there that's going to help me in the long term, or I'm just looking for this quick short-term success because I can buy a few coins by logging into Microsoft Azure? Is it going to help my overall program? There's one large company that has prided itself in connecting banks to do a transaction cross-border. But that's all you hear. Nothing else has happened amongst those banks. And they don't tell you what the transaction was. But you talk to the CEO of the bank, oh, we connected to our sister bank in Egypt. Yeah, but what was transacted? What did you do? Okay? And none of that has been released yet. Watch out for the hype, okay? And have the vendors that are representing an open source or a private solution prove it to you. If they can't prove it, then you show them the door, let them get out, because it'll just be wasting your time. You'll be better off doing it on your own, trying an open source solution yourself, and then deciding whether or not you have to go to what they're pushing as an enterprise solution or a private solution where they get to make the big bucks, okay, and you get to pay those big bucks. But don't shy away from open source solutions. There are some excellent ones out there, especially supporting blockchain technology. Thank you.
There is any consensus between the financial institution regarding the blockchain or not? And Richard Brown, he is the CTO of R3. This guy, before maybe a few months ago, he has a statement, and he said there is no way that banks will agree to have one distributed ledger. After a couple of months, he changed his opinion. And he said, now, finally, we have a system, okay, that system or technology that runs between different organizations and that organization don't trust each other and bring them in consensus. This is 75 largest financial institution, and you know R3. What is a blockchain? I think you heard what's blockchain. Now, which color you want your blockchain? This is a question. Okay. Do we need a blockchain in our institution or in our work or not? I try to look at definition for a blockchain, and the best definition I found it for blockchain is reduce the cost of establishing and maintenance trust. Why? Now we trust banks, but we don't trust each other. If I tell you to give me your salary, I will give it to you, okay? And if you need any money, I will give you. You will trust me? No. And the example yeah, it's 100 dirham. You're not going to give me the money, but you will give it to the bank. You need a third party to save your money or save your transaction. That third party, it costs money. Like I'll give you an example about the credit card or Visa, Master. When you go to the shop, you swap your card, the transaction done. But in reality, no. In reality, you need 4 parties to agree in that transaction. And it took 30 days to settle the amount, plus 2% from 1 to 3% charges. And this is the transaction of MasterCard and or the financial sector transaction. It costs like 2% from a whole GDP, of the world GDP, and huge amount. It's trillions of money. Now, can we reduce it? It's possible. There is a way to reduce it, but we need a lot of technology. I agree with the doctor that we need from 5 to 10 years to see the advantage of the blockchain. We'll not see it today. All of us, we're running something called Sandbox. We try to explore this technology. It is disruptive technology, but not alone. It needs other things also to be disruptive, to change our process. But blockchain has a features, and this features really not, these features come to me not from reading about blockchain, about my experience when I try to implement blockchain in e-voting and other services. And I have an announcement for all the brokers. Be ready. We have a project also coming soon. We will work with you in blockchain. We saw there is a speed and efficiency. Why? Because BC talking with the BCs. Quickly, I'll give you an example in e-voting. Like if I want to check your identity, just put your stamp, go to the Emirates ID, verify, get all the information, register, finish. And it's done in seconds. Okay, your shares moving from CSD, going to your wallet, then you go and vote. And everything is done in seconds. Before, in the AGM, usually you go and register in the desk. They should check in the paper, you get the paper, auditor come also verify the result, and all this take time. But now, it's done in seconds. There is other technology can do that, yes. But in blockchain, it has a feature, the cost of implementing the technology. The cost is a very important element here. Can we do it with other software? Yes, it's possible. But bring a blockchain here, because it's open source, out of the box, just modify it, implement it. It's very easy, very basic, okay? And there's a reduction in cost for that. Take the cost. Other point we saw on the blockchain, the improving market access. Yeah, there is an element which should be touched by the regulator, by the other speaker, KYC, AML, but we have more access by using blockchain. Not ADX, Citigroup now, they work in Asia. They try to penetrate 1 billion customers. Other European banks try to penetrate Africa with 250 million customers to open their account and have more money. Already Citigroup work with Citicoins. There is a potential here. I agree with the other speakers. It's emerging. It's new. Okay? It's still missing a lot of things, like governance. And I think last week or before 2 weeks, there is a World W meeting here in Dubai. And they said in their meeting they will issue a governance for a blockchain. But till today I didn't see any paper result from that meeting. But we need governance for blockchain to be implemented. We need standardization and integration. Standardization, I will give you an example about us, about the ADX. Now we have a trading engine. Trading engine executes all the trades. Okay. Brokers, they have their own system. And they send the orders to our trading engine. In our trading engine, there is a standard protocol for communication. Any broker, he can vote buy a system and connect it to our trading engine and send it. Now in the blockchain, okay, if I took coded or chain, okay, or multi-chain, and you are working with other chain or another system, how I will integrate those two? How I will let those two communicate with each other? I have a problem. Or how I will move the data between one to end? This problem needs to be solved. Regulation, this is also important. And in regulation, there is two parts, and standardization and regulation. Now in standardization, already Australian group working with that, with the W3, World Wide Web, and they submit a paper to ISO to issue a standardization regarding the blockchain. Regulation, already SCE in the United States, they have a workforce for maybe 2 years now or 3 years looking in that area, and they will try to issue a regulation regarding using a blockchain. Other thing also very important, the application that work with the blockchain. Now we know a blockchain is just database between different computers with a lot of functionality or features, but I need the result. I need to see the result. I need to mine that result. Okay, I need another software also to read from the blockchain or from that ledger. Still, this area is not covered or not clear yet. I will give you an example. There is a company called BitShares. It's a currency company trading all those cryptocurrencies. They have very beautiful workstation. When you open it the first time, and they mention this is a blockchain. But in reality, not this blockchain, this is an application and above the blockchain. Our Francis already talked about our experience here. We already implement blockchain in our organization and try to be important, but this one is still. We need to talk with those people, with the auditors. I need to give the auditors the comfort that when they come and they get the result from our chain, they said, okay, it's approved. They should know about it, and I think we need to sit with them. The authority already, we agree with them, and they saw, and we already will install a node to them to see about all the AGM, about everything happening in that AGM. The listed company, some of them, yes, we talk with them, and we will install a node with them to verify and see about the meeting, about their meeting. Now, we need only to finish with this part with the auditors. Maybe we'll install a node in each auditor and audit office, and they should verify everything. From our experience, we have 4 points. Design. This is very important. If you want to use a blockchain, not a blockchain, any process, you want to automate any process, you should work in the design and emphasize your design. You should be clear about design and what you will get from that design. Second, which chain you will use. And this is important. You will use Hyperledger from IBM. You will use chain.com. You will use Coda from R3. You use multi-chain. Which chain? Because each chain has its own specification. And sometimes you need to join the feature of 2 chains together. And this is very important. Implementation. Implementation also is very important. How you will run your chain or your network. How you will build it. And finally, the resources. Resources is very important also. In terms of IT. How you will build your chain or modify your chain. 1. Second, how you will maintain it. This is very important. Now, there is no a lot of, and there is no, let's say, programmers, no peoples working in that area. And if you want to get somebody to work in that area, it's very expensive because it's new. Thank you. This is my presentation, and I think, as the economist said, this is the trust machine, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, the world will change or the business model will change. Thank you.